Welcome back to the show. So we have news tonight, breaking news. Zoran Mamdani has won the mayoral race in New York City. I'm going to break down for you what this means. Well, to put it lightly, if you've been following my channel, then you'll understand what's happening. The Zionists won, the Zionists lost today. The globalists have triumphed. Look at the world as a chessboard, and the Zionists are versus the globalists. Right now, the globalists took a very strategic city and a strategic victory over a formerly Zionist stronghold on the map. They're on the ropes. I don't see Israel and the Zionists surviving this. I knew Israel and the Zionists were in trouble when they took out Kirk. They were far too desperate, far too sloppy, and I was wondering what's wrong. Why would they be so just that it just seems so like it's just something you would do out of fear. And I was thinking to myself, what could the Zionists be afraid of? They've pretty much controlled our country for the past 70 years. They control our arsenal, they control our media, they control our education system, Hollywood. But the globalists have kept the pressure on them the past 4 years straight with the Free Palestine protests and all the anti Israel campaigns that have been running. They were all funded by the globalists. What did the globalists do? They brought the third world into Europe, the Middle East, Africa. They've strategically put mayors of South Asian descent in power all throughout Europe. And what do we have here in New York? A mayor of South Asian descent that hails from Africa is now the mayor, 30 something years old, of one of our largest great American cities, and he's an open communist. He's anti white, anti American. You know, people let their jealousy and envy of people with money and of white Americans get the best of them. I keep telling people that in a capitalist society, we cannot compete with socialists and communists because there are a lot of people who do not share inherent American desire to work for oneself. Everyone doesn't have a sense of self respect and believe in self determination. Some people, their parents brought them here, but they didn't also share those same sentiments. I'll be honest. My The reason I know about communism is because my grandfather would tell me the stories of our home country and what we escaped, what we got away from, and why he worked so hard and why he enjoyed providing for himself and for our family and why our family did well. But my father, unfortunately, was a communist. And I remember, I think the desire for freedom probably skips a generation. Maybe it's an inherent gene. Some of us want to be slaves, some of us want to be masters, not necessarily masters of others, but masters of ourselves and masters of our own destiny. I remember being around 10 years old, and my father was complaining about how here in America we have a space program. I bullshit you not. Now, I learned to speak English watching Star Trek The Next Generation and Quantum Leap. Those are the two shows I was allowed to watch in English. And so obviously, I thought space was real. I believed in spaceships and nebulas and warp speed and tachyons. And my father said that the United States should not have a space program that they're spending billions on when there are people who are hungry in America that need to be fed. And as a 10-year-old boy, my knee jerk reaction to my father was a question. My question was, well, feed them for how long? even as a kid, I realized that taking care of people forever was not a solution. It was slavery. It was actually what we escaped from. It's unsustainable to give everything away to people for free because, well, everything comes from something. So there's somebody's labor somewhere that has to be exploited for you to get your free stuff. If I walk into a grocery store and all the groceries are free, well, where'd the food in the stores come from? Who drove the trucks? Who packaged the foods? Who picked the foods? Who processed the foods? Everybody put labor in, and then there's a finished product that has a price. Now, every time I give away that product for free, I'm diminishing the value of said labor. In this situation, it's unsustainable. So that's where the government comes in to control what? In a communist society, the government steps in to control the means of production. They control the housing, they control the trucks, they control the labor. So there is labor being exploited and people are not being paid what they should, all to give you a cheaper product. Now, if you're a selfish person and you're not worried about your neighbors and you're not worried about tomorrow and you're only worried about yourself, which unfortunately is the community that now remains in the New York City, well, this is where you're going to end up. You're going to vote for this. The people that have the spirit of that American spirit in them, that want to work, believe in self-determination, also believe in basic math and understand that something cannot come from nothing. They've either left New York or they're leaving New York. We're outnumbered. We cannot compete with somebody who's going to promise to give you everything for free. Look at this. There's a voter base of people who don't want to work at all. And what he promised was, now we're going to give them free sex assignments, surgeries, free transportation. If you come to New York and you want to get those free surgeries so we can cut off your genitals, we will also give you free hotel stays and you won't have to pay for that. Just offering everybody free everything is very appealing when that literally contradicts what it means to be an American. To be an American means you want to have freedom to take care of self, because with freedom comes responsibility, a responsibility to yourself, to take care of yourself. We call it self determination. We don't want a big government telling us when to eat, what to eat, where to eat, how to eat. And if we don't do what they say, they take away what we eat. Right now, you got 42 million Americans begging the king for food. 400-pound obese people crying and begging for free food. But what about the other 300 million of us who actually have to go out and pay for our own food? That right there also diminishes our buying power and diminishes the value of our dollar. It also diminishes the value of our production. It's unsustainable. And it's also growing because more and more people are coming here and they're discovering that there's an exploit. If you don't want to work, you don't have to. All you have to do is check a couple of boxes and declare that you're going to be a Democrat, and they will buy your votes. As a conservative, if we're not willing to compete and also purchase your votes, there's no way, there's no real competition. After a while, eventually we're going to fall. What Mamdani is proposing in New York is a hydrogen bomb for the New York economy. And I'll explain to you how in a second, because some people are not good with, they've never been in real estate. They've never participated in a marketplace of ideas. They've never owned anything. They just want to take. They just have their hands out. Where I'm from, there's a saying, a man with his hand out is a man with his tongue out. And I'm pretty sure you understand what that means. We don't believe in begging. You are supposed to take care of your family yourself. But they've created these systems where you can't even have a family. You can't be a man in the house. So naturally, this was the progressive next step. A lot of these people, especially the women, they don't have husbands, they don't have children, and they've gotten old. They're in their 60s. Who's going to take care of them? No husband and no children. Feminism brought them to this point, and now they're lonely. So they're going to beg the government, they're going to beg the king for communism to support them in their old age. Because typically, once you get to a certain age, your kids are now the ones taking care of you. You live with your kids. This whole people living alone and trying to take care of themselves and working until they're 90, this is a brand new concept. Before, in the old days of maybe 20 years ago, there was a word that we've discarded nowadays that it was called family. I remember my grandmother lived with us, my great grandmother as well. That is not a thing anymore. They want communism. And it seems like we were always poised for this because we became too big and too strong as a nation. Our enemies realized they could not fight us in direct combat with a standing army, so they had to outsmart us, which wasn't very difficult because, unfortunately, in a capitalist society, obviously everything is for sale. That includes votes, influence, politicians. There's only a few of us left that at our core, we believe in American values and we're not for sale. But I'm not sure where this new future leaves us. So I'll explain to you why this is a hydrogen bomb for New York City. For one thing, if you do a rent freeze in New York City, and mind you, the reason people are want to dismiss this is because a hedge fund tycoon, Cliff Asness, is the one who said that this is a hydrogen bomb. People hate hedge fund managers. They hate white men in particular. Mamdani hates white men. They're open about this. Their jealousy and their envy for these men in their position is what blinds them to the future. They're not thinking ahead or what this means. For one thing, if you can't increase the rents, then buildings can't really survive because every year things go up. Property taxes, insurance, utilities, maintenance, repair. There's mandatory city upgrades. I mean, this is a heavily regulated city like New York City. The crazy part is, this is what destroyed New York in the 70s. But see, people today are so fucking dumb and so dim, and they're not taught history. So, what's that saying? If you're not taught history, you're doomed to repeat it. But we're going back through it again. The crazy part is, a lot of gay people I see in New York and a lot of black people I see that are getting on the internet, they're celebrating this because their ultimate goal, ever since the lockdowns of 2020, was to see all of their neighbors just as equally poor as them. See, there was something in this country that was called, they called it inequality of income. Oh, these families have more money than these families. Well, these families have two parents working, and these families are have a communist lifestyle that the two parents that work, their tax income subsidizes your communist lifestyle. So of course you're going to see disparities because you guys don't want to work. You're going to blame it on racism, oppression, all kinds of buzzwords, sexism, Zionism, fucking, you're going to blame it on xenophobia. You're going to blame it on everything in the world besides, I'm just a lazy piece of shit. You're not going to want to admit to being that. So you're going to want to blame it on everything else. So I noticed that back during the lockdowns of 2020, where I lived in a very well-to-do area, I lived in downtown LA. Before all of downtown became Skid Row, Skid Row was literally just two streets. San Pedro, and St. Julian. Now my entire city is Skid Row. I remember watching that there were restaurants and shops that were closing and never reopening. And I would feel horrible because I watched these people build their businesses over years of being downtown. I watched these restaurants open. We anticipated certain bars opening, certain little, niche places opening, and to watch them close because the governor refused to let them open because of an imaginary virus. It broke my heart, but it didn't break the heart of the neighbors. See, there were certain people, like the ones I just described in New York, who celebrated watching you lose everything so that they could just say, ha ha, now you're back down here with me. Now you're back down here with me, someone who had no ambition, no drive, was lazy, didn't want to put in the work, just wanted to stick my hand out, beg, and complain my whole life because they probably saw their parents do that. Again, the jealousy and envy, if you enable it, it will bring down your society. And we have a huge problem with that all throughout this country. And it's allowed to fester because to address it would mean that you can now be labeled a racist or a sexist or whatever the hell. So people just let it go. But well, now look, you're losing one of your greatest American cities to the people that wanted to see everyone fail. Now, over time, when you can't raise the rent on these buildings, the buildings become underwater because the income that's coming in is less than the expenses every month. Remember, these buildings they have an owner, just like a house has an owner, but even homeowners have a mortgage and you have a bank that you have to pay every month, but you're not going to be able to pay it if these rents are stopped and your bills become too high because you're going to have to pay out of your savings and eventually you'll run out. It's not sustainable long term. Now, for people that are jealous and envious, that sounds great. They want to see you lose everything. But they're the same type of people that are like Cameron Diaz in Vanilla Sky. They'll crash a car even when they're in it just to take you out. They'll cut their own nose off to spite their face. And these are the people that you are celebrating them being allowed to vote in communism. You know what they say, right? You can vote in communism, but you can never vote out of communism. We in the future, we would literally have to take New York State back by force. The problem is the poor who want everyone to be equally poor in this city, they're going to be entrenched. Not because they believe that being poor is the way, it's just that they're tired of feeling less than or looking or being looked down upon or being judged for being a loser by people who decided to make something of themselves and work. See, when they see a man, whether no matter what race you are, but you have a suit and tie on and you're going to work, the people who choose to not work, they hate you. They hate seeing you get up to do something with yourself, and they watch you every single morning. You get up, you get dressed, you leave. On the weekends, they see you with your kids in your car, having fun, and they wish they could be you, minus the hard work and dedication it took to become you. They want to see all of this go away. If they think that you're their landlord, they pray for the day that you lose your place too. Even if the state's going to come in and buy your place and your landlord's going to be the government, as long as it's not you, they're happy. That's why the title of this video is New York is going to be a paradise for the poor. Remember back when Kamala Harris was talking about equity and nobody understood? They're like, did she mean equality? And no, she meant equity. Equity, this is why I said it's called the creep of communism. She was proposing this years ago. When you put these proposals out there, it can literally, in small increments, change the mindset of a normally rather reasonable person. She started to warm people up into the fact that maybe it might be better for you if, instead of you being poor and then other people being rich, how about we just make everyone around you equally poor? That way, none of you guys can look down on each other and you just all won't have shit. See, that's what it's like in my home country. We don't have to pay for housing, and you get a voucher for food. And with that voucher, you go to the store and you have the equivalent of like government cheese. You get a certain amount, a certain weight of a meat, of a protein. You get bread, and that's your rations. And you're going to figure out how to cook and make that stretch for the week. But you don't got to pay for housing, and you don't really got to pay for food. And if you do work, the average Cuban makes on average about $17 a month. I remember going to the Copacabana for New Year's. There's no Cubans there, just foreigners, because the ticket's about $300. That's most of the year's salary. That's more than a year's salary for the average person from the island. I remember being a kid, I used to wonder, like, I asked my granddad, like, well, why didn't everybody leave in the Bay of Pigs? Like, if Cuba, if communism is inherently evil and it's slavery, why didn't everybody leave? And that's when I was taught to understand that there's the whole master slave dynamic between humans. It's fairly common. It's a part of the human dynamic. There are more people than you think that want to be slaves. Even in the United States, they tell you the stories of Juneteenth. They tell you, oh, they had to go to Galveston to go free the other slaves that didn't know that they were free for the past 4 years. After watching a communist become elected in New York City, and then a communist mayor in Atlanta offer to do rent freezes just so he can get reelected today, I start to realize that slavery is a choice. Years ago, Kanye said that, but nobody wanted to go into what he meant. Slavery is a choice. People will rather choose slavery over having to think for themselves, figure out things for themselves, decide where they're going to live and how to take care of their kids individually. Responsibility is hard, but slavery is easy. Why do you think so many men, adult men, opt to, they choose to go to prison every day? You have three hots and a cot. You have three hot meals and a bed in prison. You have a warden that tells you when to get up to go to work, when to go to eat, when to shower. A lot of people, millions and millions of people enjoy, I would call it slavery. Some people would call it structure. They're not able to figure out a structure for themselves to stick to. And then don't get a wife and have children. And then don't let that wife not want to listen to you. Well then you now your family doesn't have structure. And the laws here in this country enable families to break up and for you not to have the structure in your home. And all of this is a controlled demolition of the things that made this country strong from the beginning. We're watching it all happen, and there's really not much we can really do about it in these big cities because, well, big cities are where you move to when you don't want to work anymore. When you move out of the cities and you move to red states and conservative areas around into the country, you're going to have to work and take care of yourself. But there are people that are moving into these cities because they want to be told what to do. They want slavery. They want a master. And they're choosing that they want their master to be the government And even if they pretend to hate Trump, they want a king. They want the king to feed them and tell them what to do, where to go, and what to do. And I'm not sure, like I said, there's nothing you can really do to compete with this. I mean, like I said, people don't want to think about what this means. If you have a building and there's a rent freeze, banks won't lend to you. Banks won't lend to people on buildings if the building can't raise their rent. A bank won't do they won't do loans to a building that you can't raise the rents on. They won't. So those buildings lose values. Loan approvals collapse. Refinancing becomes impossible. Construction completely stops. Small landlords go bankrupt. And you know what they do in these cities? They pass bills that say that the city has first right of refusal on purchases of properties that have went bankrupt. They did it in LA. That's how they took a lot of properties from owners that could not figure out how to continue to pay their mortgage during the lockdown when everybody decided they didn't want to pay their rent. Some landlords got lucky and their tenants decided to keep paying their rent even though they didn't have to. Bless those people. But for the rest that took advantage, when you live in a big building that's corporate owned, you don't know the landlord. You're just a number. You're a tenant. You're not, they don't even know your last name. They just know you as apartment 2230, account number 4544. You're not a person to them. So a lot of people they didn't feel any type of way about not paying that rent for 3.5, 4 years. Then all of a sudden, one day, I remember they turned the rent back on. I remember getting an email. They were like, hey, the rent's starting back up September 2023. But rents had been turned off where there were no evictions since March of 2020. We didn't have, it's just like what they're doing in Atlanta, just like they're talking about doing in New York. We didn't have to pay the water bill. We didn't have to pay for rent. And if you're doing natural gas in your house, you didn't have to pay that either. They would not turn off any of your utilities. So you know what that did? That gave hardworking Americans in California a taste of something that they never knew they wanted, a taste of communism. And initially, do you know what communism tastes like for a brief moment? It tastes like financial freedom because you're working from home. You're just not going into the office, so you're still getting paid. And there was EDD and PPP, and now you have every month on the first, you don't have to send that money in for your rent. So that money's just going into your pocket. A lot of people wanted to travel. I told everybody don't. So they went out and took those shots so that they can go to Hawaii and go to Mexico. Magically, all my friends now are dying from cancer and heart attacks. And I'm like, was it worth it? You know, I'll be honest. I've thrown Taco Tuesdays at my house. I could have just bought some watermelon juice for you. You didn't have to go to fucking Hawaii to get pineapple. You didn't have to go to Mexico to eat tacos. I would have thrown a Taco Tuesday for you all, and I would have just served tacos and pineapple juice, just so that you wouldn't have had to comply to go to these places. But I could only convince those who were in my network. I didn't have a YouTube channel at the time. I did, but I partied on it all the time. I didn't have these conversations where I could sit here and have a long form talk with people where we could reason with each other and you can know what I'm thinking and I can explain myself to you. I was known for getting drunk, going to clubs, going to parties, making jokes and laughing and, fucking around. And then one day I remember I couldn't party no more because everything closed on me. I had no idea what was happening. And even though I was partying a lot, I had a beautiful girlfriend and I really cared about her a lot. And then she owned a Pilates studio and then her studio closed. And every day we're asking, well, when are we going to reopen? But we're the business owners. We want to reopen. But everybody in LA is not a business owner. So you know what everybody else said? They told me to shut up, Rico. Don't complain about this. Don't say nothing. This is a hustle. And you're knocking our hustle. Shh. They wanted everything closed. They wanted all the free stuff. They didn't want to take care of themselves. Eventually, my girlfriend had to move with her family into another state and leave. And then the crime got so bad. There's crackheads walking around with masks on, and I couldn't even walk my dogs. It was a little too dangerous, and I'll end up doing something to somebody, and I'll go to jail. I'm not really worried about the public. The public should be worried about me. So I was worried about what I would do to someone on accident or on purpose because it was just too dangerous. So eventually I had to evacuate and leave Los Angeles, and I've never returned. Houston, Vegas, Scottsdale, Cartagena. I'm all over the place. I'm never back in LA. And I was Mr. LA. I would have never left California. But when the communists came and they offered communism, I knew that when you tried to take it away from people, they would scream. Soon as that rug pull started and they turned rent back on and the communism ended and capitalism restarted, now all my friends and family members and neighbors are being killed in robberies. The crime goes through the roof. But also during the lockdown was the George Floyd protest where everyone was telling the police, we don't need you anymore. We will police ourselves. That's another big part of communists. They don't want law enforcement. They want chaos. They want crime. They want instability and insecurity. That's how you take more power. You know, it's crazy to watch everything repeating itself. I remember when Castro, I remember the stories of Castro. And if you don't believe me, go to Netflix. There was a series called Celia. Watch, don't listen to the storyline of the romanticized version of the woman that becomes a singer. Look at the background, the setting of where they're at and what's happening politically with the society around her. That's the society my family comes from. That's the society we're trying to avoid. So for a lot of us, it's so ironic. You move your children away from communism just for your children to become spoiled and fat and beg to go back into communism. That's why for us it's just like, but then again, they don't know what it is. They think free stuff is utopia. They don't understand the amount of free stuff you get well is controlled by the state, and it shrinks every month. So even if you're given 2,000 a month in UBI, the value of that 2,000, you're going to get the same amount every month, but the value becomes 1,900, 1,850, 1,800, still 2,000, but the value of that free money. Remember, you're not there's somebody else's labor being exploited, so the value of your currency is being diminished gradually. I remember the movie The Hunger Games, and people would ask me, how could this ever happen? You're watching it. Now you understand when they say escape from New York, escape from LA, two of the biggest cities in the country that have embraced communism. There's nobody with money in a communist society because the most dangerous place to be is a person with stuff surrounded by people without it. They want to storm your house the way 500 years ago they used to want to storm the castle. They blame the rich for their issues. But the threshold for who they consider as rich, when your value of the dollar decreases, so does the threshold of who they consider to be rich. They might consider you, if you're a millionaire, you're rich. Eventually, they'll consider somebody who's worth 900,000 as rich, and then 700,000, then 5. Then anybody who's ever made more than $100,000 in 1 year will be considered the rich that they want to eat. And what if that's you? Because you inherited a family business or because you went to school. or because you went to a trade school, you learned how to work with your hands, you started a service. You think the communists around you, you think they're going to let you keep all your money while they're poor, and you're still making them look bad. They need you to be equally poor like them. You have to also be in the line waiting for your rations. You also need to be waiting for your SNAP benefits, because if you don't, you make them look bad. Remember, the enemy is jealousy and envy. It's no longer a particular mindset or ideology. I don't know. At this point, it's jealousy and envy. The most people that I've ever known to be murdered were people who somebody else was jealous of them or envied them. And they would pretend it was over something else, but really they just got tired of seeing you. You made them look at themselves. You know, there's two men that are both from the same starting point, except one of them is over here making things happen and the other one is just sitting around on his hands complaining about life. Well, first chance he gets to take that other guy out, he will, because, well, you're making me look bad. He's looking at you too with an envious eye. That jealousy, that envy is real. What Mamdani did was he just honed in on it. These people call themselves marginalized or oppressed because they see someone who looks different than them that gets up and goes to work. They don't have face tattoos. There's no septum in their nose. They look presentable. They dress up. They can walk into a place and they look professional. Have you ever heard any of these people on Snap or the food stamps? Have you heard any of them speak on these videos? I bet you have. I bet you it's the first time you've ever heard these people talk. And I bet you're also wondering, a person who only speaks English, who barely has a grasp on the English language, I wonder where they work. And then you realize when you wake up the next day, you say, oh, wow. The reason they don't have a grasp on the English language is because they don't have to work. They've never had to be professional. So they can sound and talk like that because they don't have to deal with anybody except other people like them. And due to jealousy and envy, who do they think is the enemy? People like you and people like me. People who work, people who generate. They don't want us to live anywhere near them. So when Mamdani is becoming elected and they're saying, well, millions of people are going to flee New York, they're celebrating. I remember in my home country when the people that were fair skinned. See that? Have you ever been to Cuba? You ever notice that the Cubans look like me or really really dark? But when you go to Miami, all the Cubans there are white, fair skinned, like my mother. Have you ever wondered why that is? It seems like because the darker you are, the higher your tolerance is for communism. I don't know if it's racial or if it's based on melanin, or but melanated people tend to enjoy communism in the West. Now there are communists that live in other parts of the world, but they do flee. But when it came to Cuba, the fair skinned people who wanted to work and did not want to and wanted to be able to earn and take care of themselves, they couldn't do that in Cuba, so they left. And the dark skinned Cubans who wanted to be taken care of, the ones who enjoyed another form of slavery, well, they stayed. And if you looked like you had more than them, or if you looked like you were doing too much, they'd hunt you down, rob you, kill you. So you had to defect, you had to leave. And the government was glad. They wanted you gone. They don't want opposition. And you know what that did? That meant Fidel Castro survived what, over 100 assassination attempts, because again, you can go into communism, you can't come out, because those who are entrenched around you, those who are insecure about being poor and insecure about not having anything, and they don't want other people around them that are going to make them envious and jealous, They are going to protect those who create the communism with their lives. That's why they were never able to get Castro, because the Cubans around him enjoyed communism too much. And the ones who didn't left. So, what do you think you're going to see in New York? You have your new dictator, Mamdani, and there's no getting rid of him. There is no voting him out. And then what are you going to do? Come in and be more of a communist? It doesn't. You're a communist or you're not. You're not. I don't think there's levels to it. You think people are going to eventually say, you know what? We're going to vote to get the rent to go up and to bills to start up again. We're going to vote in somebody. No, no. I mean, honestly, when it's time for the mayor, I don't see him stepping down. If anything, his wife will be the mayor or somebody else related to him. It's they're not going to let this go. It will become entrenched. And those who are American first or just Americans in general believe in self determination, they're going to leave, and they're already gone. They're taking off. It's not going to be safe for them. There will not be money for law enforcement. Mamdani already said he wants to shut down Rikers Island and the jail. If you don't remember that movie, Escape from New York, go watch it again. Snake Dresden. Go watch it. How do you think it got to that point? This man said he wants to shut down the jails, shut down Rikers Island, open up state owned grocery stores. But he's also Islamic. They're eventually going to restrict your right to gamble. They're going to restrict the cigarettes. And they're going to put a cap on the liquor, anything that's not halal. But you don't know that because you're an envious and jealous idiot. And you thought that people had certain jobs and positions and were rich just because they were white. See, that was your way of coping with the fact that you did nothing with yourself in your life. And you didn't have that drive and you didn't have that it factor where you could make things happen. You were raised to believe in excuses. So you made them for yourself. Your parents made them for themselves. And you would see people walk past you every day that didn't have those excuses bred into them. And you hate them because you feel they're better than you. You would call them white supremacists, but that only means that you see them as supreme compared to you. You see yourself as inferior. Your jealous and envious inferiority complex is what caused this issue. It's a rupture in the fabric of America now. Unfortunately, it's going to spread because of the gap in these big cities. Remember, capitalists fund this utopian communist lifestyle for these people. You know, it's just like certain people, if you have to go to your friends and beg them to help you, and they do, and then later on you see that friend and you're like, hated the fact that I had to ask you for help. You learn, you end up resenting them. I went through that with family. I had to help bail them out of stuff, feed them. And later, they resented me for it. But at the time, they worshiped me, they begged me. But later, they tried to pretend that they never had to ask me for anything. And I remember them telling me, "You never did anything for me." And I'm like, "I have the receipts. What do you mean I didn't do anything for you?" "Yeah, I did." But people resent you for helping them. That's the same thing we're dealing with in America. Because when I'm looking at the people that are dependent the most upon the government, those are the same people I see a year ago complaining about the government. They hate the government. They don't want to be considered Americans. They hate America. They don't believe in our values. But those are the same people that we have to feed. So I guess they're fanatics. You know, they're such big fans of the government that they eventually become fanatics, and they love the government so much they start to hate it. Hydrogen bomb for New York. There won't be any new housing created in New York with a rent freeze because no one will build anything. So there'll be fewer new units, scarcity, higher black market pricing, more subletting, worse conditions for renters. So Eventually, what he's going to do is they're going to push the whole micro units. That means already small New York apartments, they're going to make them smaller, dice up those buildings. One person cubicles, 300 square feet, just enough room for you to go to sleep at night, wake up, shared hallway bathroom. But guess what? Everyone's living the same way and they're not watching TV shows about the lifestyles of the rich and famous, and shit, no one's going to complain. People are only going to complain when their neighbor down the hall is like, man, you guys live like rats. You guys are living in squalor. You guys look like shit. Then they're going to get a complex about themselves. Then it's going to be a problem. But if everyone's equally poor, no one will care. And that, my friends, is why they were pushing equity. They wanted you as an adult man to become a dependent on the state. As an adult man, they didn't want you to take care of yourself and your family. They wanted you to stick your tongue out and ask the king to give you something to feed, somewhere to live, something to eat. People don't understand what they were begging for or what they're going to get. The problem is, this is going to spill out into the rest of the country. Atlanta, they've already done it starting today. And I didn't know there was even an election. I was just thinking to myself when I was doing this story earlier, I was like, oh yeah, he's buying votes. But this is going to happen in other cities. I see this happening in Virginia. I see this happening it's already happening in LA. Where else is very expensive? Houston. I see this happening in Florida, if they can. I don't know if DeSantis is going to allow it. Depends on who wins the governorship in Florida. But now people know if you can come in from another country, run for mayor. All you got to do is say, look, give me control of the city and the budget, and I'll give you free everything. Now, where the money's going to come from in the budget, who cares? We'll deal with that later. But in the short run, I'm going to give you what you want. Don't worry about the consequences. Just take this right now. Don't think too far ahead. Think about today. And you'll be surprised how many people in your local communities agree with that and will be willing to do that and are not, they don't want to be adults. I know 50-year-old people right now. It used to be only women because throughout history, women depended on men for everything. So women didn't really work. They took care of the home and families, but they no longer have families. So who are you going to be taking care of? So if you're a man, you don't have a family anymore to take care of. So all this free stuff just gives you more time to mess around and accomplish nothing. You gotta speak to your audience. If that's your audience, and that's what it is. Mamdani proposing communist style economics is basically price controls, state intervention, eliminating market function, and equally poor outcomes for everyone. And what have I been stressing this entire life? They want everyone to be equally poor. Question is, are you ready for that? Are you okay with that? If you're gay, if you're black, you're going to say yeah, because you go into these office settings where you have to work and you have a lot of insecurities about yourself because you're battling with mental illness. To believe that everyone around you is racist and they hate you based on your color, you have a inferiority complex, but you also have a personality of paranoia. You have a disorder with that. If you're a man who thinks you're trapped in a woman's body or vice versa, you're dealing with gender dysmorphia. You have another mental illness. When you're battling with a mental disease, but you're going around people that are working and are relatively normal, functioning in society, it's not going to work out. So a lot of these people don't want to work. They're battling too many mental issues and they can't work. This is a perfect scenario for them. I can actually see the population of New York increasing eventually, or kind of breaking even the exodus. But then people from around the country are going to be like, well, if I can go to New York and get free housing, free buses, free sex change surgery, free food, free hotel, well then why would I not? Why would I stay in Texas? Why would I leave LA? So you're going to start seeing the communists are going to relocate to places like New York, Los Angeles, Atlanta, because that's where all the free stuff is. And those of us who prefer freedom will be going to Florida, Texas, Arizona, Oklahoma. And we're going to just basically be a country divided. And eventually there will be a conflict. There will be a strife. It's just that unfortunately we're outnumbered by the communists. There's too many people that want free stuff. 42 million Americans. Isn't that like roughly 13% of the population? You know who else makes up 13% of the population? Yeah, never mind. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe not. Maybe I'm just making that up. Maybe it's well just a weird coincidence. Just things coincide with each other. Out of all the numbers, 13%, 42 million, 40 million. That's just a weird number coincidence. Weird source of a problem. I remember I told people eventually this was going to be a problem. You're not addressing it, it's going to fester, it's going to grow. The fact that you can get on the internet and talk openly about killing white people, they're so evil, white people, but you can't say nothing about Jews or anybody else. But when it comes to white people, you can just open. And I said, you don't think this is eventually going to cause a cancer and a fissure in the country that you could potentially watch it slip away unless you do something about that problem? Sure, did we make a concerted attempt to vaccinate ourselves out of this by injecting 40% with something? Yes, but is it working fast enough? I don't know. I know the Zionists and the globalists came together when it came to that. But now that campaign is over to vaccinate everybody, I see them now stabbing each other in the back trying to see who's going to be on top. I guess they didn't think it was going to work. And now that they see it's working, they're like, well, I didn't do all that just to be number two. You think Mamdani won? No, the globalists won. The Zionists lost. Problem is, you're going to be swapping out the enemy that you know for the enemy that you don't. All we know so far about the globalists and their agenda is what we're seeing happen in the UK right now. But the future they have of cybernetics and transhumanism, all that stuff, that's all what's on the menu next. You think this all this transgenderism is just for no. This is all leading to transhumanism. That's the whole reason why they push it. And states like New York are going to be the epicenter for all of these programs. And we just lost New York. So, it doesn't, it's not like you're going to say, well, the people are going to learn. What are they going to learn? We got Brandon Johnson in Chicago. Look at Chicago. Is that going to change anything? No, because the poorest people around him are going to want to protect him because they're going to feel like he's making them feel better about themselves. He's not giving them a complex. They're not talking to you about working. Telling you got to work and pay for your own food. It's insulting to a lazy person. They're tired of being insulted. So you get a communist in there that's going to tell them, actually, the reason you don't have food is because of racism. They're going to love you. They love Brandon Johnson. They're going to love Mamdani. They're going to love any of these foreign-born communists that come over here and join our politics because you can buy your way in. The globalists have a lot of money. The Zionists have a lot of money, but the Zionists were only trying to put other Zionists in place. It's like they didn't see this coming. They were too fat. They had been too successful for too long. They've never had their authority questioned or challenged. But I hope it's not like a jealous boyfriend. Right now you have the globalists and Zionists fighting over the girl, the Americans. And you know how sometimes in these relationships they say, well, if I can't have her, nobody can. And we know what that means. I hope it doesn't get to that point for us. But New York, you have your Mamdani, you have all your free stuff. Congratulations to you, I guess. Like and subscribe, share the video. Right wing Rico. I'll be back on live in a few minutes, and then we'll go over some other topics. Cheers.